Hello and welcome back to the A and B Sides podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Isaac.
And I'm Zach, and today we'll be taking a look at the newest collab album by Future and Lil Uzi Vert, Baby X Baby Pluto. But before we get into the album, I just want to talk about projects that are coming out in 2021. But before that, let's talk about this.
So in 2020, obviously, the whole coronavirus put the world at a halt, and especially the music world, where most artists couldn't come out with some of their bigger stuff because they were reluctant to tour on them because they wouldn't get any people interested in going on a tour. So a lot of bigger artists moved back their projects that were planning to come out in 2020. Some of these big names include Tyler the Creator, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, Charlie XCX. While she did drop an album earlier, it was a much smaller album in more reaction to the quarantine, and Frank Ocean, which is just always a crapshoot at this point.
Okay.
But Zach wanted to talk about especially J. Cole, who did lay out a map on what he was planning to do in 2021.
Right, so J. Cole, he's one of my favorite artists, and I know it's one of your favorite artists too. And I follow him on Twitter and Instagram, and he really did promise his fans that he would drop the Fall Off in 2020, but that was before the whole COVID thing blew everything out of proportion. Thankfully, he has not kept his fans completely in the dark, because on Instagram, he posted recently that he had a whole spreadsheet, like a whole list of things that he wanted to do. The first one was his features, like all the features he went on. The second one was his Revenge of the Dreamers that he came out with his crew, Dreamville, which was really good. I really liked it.
I agree.
And then right after that, he has two other things that he needs to get crossed off right before he comes out with the Fall Off. The first one was the off season. Now, the off season, a lot of people speculate that it's just like him taking a break from all this music stuff and just going on the low. But also, a lot of people are super hopeful that it's another project he wants to drop before the Fall Off. And I'm kind of hopeful for that because, more J. Cole music. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah, and it does kind of fall in line with his earlier mixtapes that were kind of basketball themed. So the off-season kind of goes with basketball, so it could be.
Right. And then right after that, he has It's a Boy, and that's a whole lot clearer because he is getting a son soon. His wife is about to get a son. That's all gonna happen. And then right after that, he has It's a Fall Off right at the bottom. So we're thinking that after he gets a son and all that gets cleared up, he's dropping the Fall Off, and I am very hopeful and I am super excited for that because judging that it's J. Cole, I think it's gonna be one of his best projects yet.
Absolutely, a very hyped up project by fans and himself. Really excited for what 2021 will bring us musically. So now getting into the review of the album, the Pluto X Baby Pluto project is the newest collab from Future and Lil Uzi Vert, two very similar artists that kind of play off each other during this project. Each of them had come up in the early to mid 2010s, really peaking around 2015 to 2017. Lil Uzi Vert especially peaked in about 2016, dropping two projects into a 2017 project, a couple of which I do fondly look back on and enjoy to this day. He also dropped a project in 2020, which is widely renowned. Personally, I think it's a mediocre album, and the extended version of that album being a little bit worse than the original version. Future has also not been silent since then. Future has been consistently dropping projects, some good, some bad, some really good singles, some really mediocre singles, and they came together to collide their minds on the new project, and a lot of people were really looking forward to this. A lot of music was promised, about 54 minutes on 16 tracks, so let's get right into it.
Right, so Pluto X Baby Pluto, it's 16 tracks long, 54 minutes, and it has some highs and I will have to say a lot of lows. Getting into the first song, Stripes Like Burberry. Now, I will say the first half was okay. It was alright at best. But then we get into Future's lines, his verses, and I just want to say he forced a lot of stuff. He forced an insanely amount of stuff, up to the point where it didn't even really sound good.
Yeah, on this one the flows were sketchy, especially from Future, And what I was expecting to be a fun playoff of each other was really not. I think the voices, and this is a bit of a theme throughout the album, the voices of the two kind of collide in such a way that they're so similar that it blends into nothing. And I felt this way especially on this track. It kind of felt like this should be a momentous occasion, but the way they play off each other, especially Future playing off Uzi, was not what I expected. So the next song, Marnie on Me. This one was rough. This one was probably the low of the album. It is an extremely popular track, however, a lot of people find it catchy, and it is a bit catchy, but it is just extremely average production, which should not happen on a Uzi and Future production, where they are both decent producers themselves, but especially since they have such a budget that they will flex on you multiple times throughout this track. They talk about their budget, but they do not spend any of it on good production on this song for sure.
Yeah, like you said, this song is just not good. Like, it does have some decent lyrics here and there, but the beat and the refrain is just so lazy. It's like, it's getting repetitive up to a point. And
Extremely repetitive.
Man, I just can't say much more about this track other than it's just lazy and just not good. But then getting on to Sleeping on the Floor. Now, this song was actually a decent song. I kind of liked it. I didn't think it was terrible considering, the two tracks up until this point. I do think Uzi saying swish here. There was a little part in a verse, I think Future was saying it, and Uzi was just saying swish, swish in the background, and I just kind of thought that was super annoying.
It was a little bit annoying. They had a little bit of better production on this one than on Marnie on Me, but I would still say this is one of the worst tracks for production-wise. They play off each other terribly on this song, especially like what Zach said, the swish. The old swish was not good. But, I mean, it's an upward swing for the album up to this point, which does lead into one of the better sections of the album, starting with the number 4 track, Real Baby Pluto. Real Baby Pluto is from the original Baby Pluto that was on Eternal Take, Uzi's new album. Baby Pluto was one of the better songs on there, and I think it's one of the better songs on here too. Real Baby Pluto is a high, it's better than the original in my opinion, but it's not one of the favorite tracks. It's not one that I revisit, but it's one that keeps this album afloat, I should say.
Definitely does keep this album afloat. I feel like this song was actually, I kind of liked it actually, but I will say, I do feel like Lil Uzi definitely carried this song. For a song that is collabed by Lil Uzi and Future, it definitely really felt like a featured song instead of like a collab, which was kind of underwhelming by Future, but other than that, I thought this song was pretty decent.
Yeah.
But this gets us right on into arguably the best song and definitely the most popular song in the entire album, Drinking and Smoking. I thought it was really good. Both artists, unlike the last couple of songs, were super good here. They actually played off each other very well, which unfortunately you did not see a lot on this album.
Yeah, and one thing that really made Drinking and Smoking extremely good was the production. The production, this is the first moment on this album where I thought, this is what I wanted from it. It was absolutely gorgeous production, and I can say nothing bad about it. And Future's flows on this one are top-notch, vintage Future flows. These are really good stuff from these two. And this is what I was really expecting from this album, and I was really expecting a bit of a turn up in quality. And another good song came after this, $1 Million Play. It was really good again. I thought this song kept the pendulum swinging upwards. Not quite as good, in my opinion, as the previous song, but really kept the quality up to what I thought it would be. It had really good production again, which I was excited about, but it was just not played well off each other, which was really disappointing.
Right.
Even though this song is good between the two on their own, they don't play off each other as well as I would hope they would with their very similar flows.
Now, as you say, this is not as good as Drinking and Smoking, but I don't think that's a very big negative because it's hard to beat that song because I think that song was honestly probably the best on the album. Million Dollar Play, I still thought it was a good song. I thought it had some fun lyrics. It was just a fun song. And if you were just to play this casually, I wouldn't have any gripes about it, but I do agree with that one negative, which does like not live up to Drinking and Smoking, which is why it's not as good as Drinking and Smoking. But now, getting on into some more lows.
Yep.
Like, I thought this little stretch was just gonna keep on going, and on my blind listen through this album, I thought, you know what, this album's looking up. Maybe it's not as terrible as people say. But then they hit us with this next track, Plastic. Let me just say, it's a bad song.
Yeah,
The lyrics were not incredible. It doesn't have the same feel as the other songs. You just kind of like it's underwhelming compared to Million Dollar Play or like Drinking and Smoking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Plastic just went back into this monotonous trudge that we would later go on to become the norm of this album. It was very boring production. I think the definite loss that this project had was that the production wasn't up to standard for these two, and I think that the hi-hats on this song were absolutely atrocious, but the worst part was how bad the voices hurt my head. Their voices on this specific track was just pinnacle terrible. They were just so high-pitched, and I love high-pitched voices. I think Kendrick Lamar, when he goes into his high-pitched voice, can really kill it, but these two they both bring it and they both cannot play off it. It is just not good. And that leads into another not great track, That's It. I think it's not great, but it's also not like terrible, not as bad as Plastic. Better production on this one, better beats to it, but the voices still are a flaw. Not a lot to say about this track other than the flows were quality, which is good.
Now, this is where I'm going to have to disagree a little bit with you. I looked on the top charts, and this was actually second, right below Drinking and Smoking. And I honestly do say, I do think the quality that Drinking and Smoking does come back here. I will agree with your negative there. I feel like the voices aren't great here. But other than that, I thought the lyrics were good, and I thought the beat was also really nice. Because when I listen to this song, I'm like, man, the voices aren't up to par, but the beat and the lyrics kind of carry it. So I thought this was a pretty okay song. But then this goes into arguably the worst song on the album, Bada Bad B. It's bad. Like, the lyrics are gross. It made me feel gross when I listened to it. Mm-hmm. And the refrain was just stupid. The refrain was so dumb. And then the verses were even worse.
I know. And it was just yucky all around. It did not make me feel like I was having fun with the track.
No.
It didn't make me feel like I was proud to listen to it. It was just kind of gross. And it could have been twisted in a more fun way. But it just wasn't, and they played off it really not great. They really emphasized some of the parts that I thought were worse than others, and I think this could have been an okay track, but they made it yucky. That's all I can say is it was yucky. The next one was Rockstar Chains, another song where I just felt like I was getting flexed on the entire time. I think the production on here was one of the better songs for production, but I just think it was not carried well with their lyrical abilities, where they could have made it a little bit clever, but it was just monotonous. And I think that the flows on here were a little bit choppy.
Yeah, this single by Future, the song is super mid. Like, it's not good, not bad, just average. Mm-hmm. I will agree, he did just flex on us for the entire song, but I will say he did have some decent bars here and there. But other than that, it just gets overshadowed by bars that were just super dumb.
Yeah.
So other than that, I don't really have much else to say about this song. I do, however, have a decent amount to say about Lullaby, which is the single that Uzi came out with on this. Now, Uzi, if you know him as an artist, he's not a whole storyteller. He just sings. And here, he actually tells us a story, which I thought was really nice. I thought it was actually different from Uzi, and it was in a good different.
Yeah.
I will say my one gripe about this song is that he's talking about all these heavy-hitting things, like how he grew up, all the crime that was happening around him, and all his heartbreak. But he sings it in such a weird way. He uses so much auto-tune when singing that, and this may just be me just listening to it, but I don't feel like auto-tune is the right way to sing about this stuff.
I think that this definitely was a more personal song for Uzi, which was very different from what we've heard up to now on pretty much anything Uzi's dropped. And I think it was one of the high moments for Uzi. But again, like what Zach said, the mixing on it was really weird. Maybe it was just the auto-tune, maybe it was the mix, maybe it was the beat, but something just didn't play right with this song. And although it is a decent story and it is a coming from the heart story, I don't think it has much replay value for me, just because it was a little bit boring for the production wise. And what one man once said was that if your story is good but your music isn't, it's not going to be heard. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is he tells a great story but it's not well done. So I think it's just hard to come back to, even though it is a high for Uzi, which is surprising on this track. The next song on this one, I can't say it was great, I can't say it was bad. It was called
She Never Been to Pluto?
Yeah, She Never Been to Pluto. I'm sorry about that, but it was just another song where I was grossed out by it. It was just not a good feeling that I got from this song. I think that the production was quality, higher quality than what it had been up to this point, especially on the last track. But I think that the lyrics of it and the feeling of it just did not give me a good vibe.
The lyrics especially. Honestly, the lyrics were just were corny or just plain bad. Like, let me read you one of the lyrics I read here. We got a lot of bands, I turned to a bandit. Like, come on, guys. That's what I expect from a SoundCloud rapper that has like maybe 100 monthly listeners, not someone that has millions and millions of monthly listeners. That is just so disappointing.
Yeah, the lyrics just left a lot to be desired, and that felt like it continued onto the next track, Off Dat. Off Dat was extremely boring, extremely monotone, just such a mid song. I couldn't get into it, but I also couldn't really hate it, just because it was just so nothing, in my opinion. The lyrics were nothing, the beat was nothing, it was sung in a monotone way. I just thought it was nothing.
I will give it one praise. The beginning of the refrain was good, but other than that, I thought the song was so lazy, possibly even lazier than Marnie on Me.
Yeah.
And I will just give a little thing here. I looked at all the lyrics and I'm like, man, that's a lot of yaz. That's a lot of yaz in this song. So I get curious, I plug it into a word counter. Yeah was said is approximately 70 times. Can you believe that? Yeah was said 70 times. You can't tell me that's a well done and well written song if you have one word. I don't care what word it is. One word that's said over 50 times, and this had 70.
It was impressive how repetitive it could be. I definitely agree with that. So getting on to the 14th track of this album, I Don't Wanna Break Up. And I thought this was a little bit of a decent pendulum swing. I think it was better than the last couple of songs had been. And it was interesting, which was something I didn't always get from this album, and I thought that was a good thing. I can't say it was a great song. It wasn't like in that stretch where it could have been up there and I thought it would have been as good as some of those songs earlier on the track list, but I think for where it was placed, it was a definite breather. for the track.
Definitely a breather. I will say, I do feel like if you put this song into like the melting pot just a little longer, I felt like it could have been a really good song because it sounds catchy. The lyrics are witty for the most part, but then it just gets overshadowed by some lyrics that are just awful. Like, here's another one I saw. She remind of my bank account because when I see her, I get rock hard. That's another SoundCloud lyric right there. Like, that is just, it's not good.
It goes along with this recent trend of just not feeling good about some of the songs, just not feeling good while listening to them. That leads us into the final two tracks, the first one being Bankroll. This was another one where I just felt like I was being flexed on really hard, and it hurts as a listener to hear that, at least for me. Maybe it's fun for other people, but it's like, people have dedicated their time and their money into you, and now you're throwing it right back in their face in such a boring way, And I feel like the whole premise of it just didn't make sense or sit well with me.
From the title to the whole song, I agree. It just felt like you were getting flexed on. I feel like it is a painstakingly average song. It's a super average song, super mid. And honestly, it's kind of forgettable in the whole scheme of things. If you were to tell 100 listeners to name off 3 songs from this album, I guarantee you none of them would say Bankroll, because I just feel like it's super forgettable in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, really disappointing way to start your end to a track list where you're just leaving us off in such a boring way. And that leads into the final song, Moment of Clarity, and all I can say is it does not live up to its title. It's anything but a moment of clarity. It's in your face, which is kind of fun at first, but it gets a little bit overused by the end of it, and it's just not what you would expect for an ender. I think it's one of the worst enders I've listened to for an album for a while. I think this definitely had potential to be fun if it was placed earlier in the track list, but it was just not how you would expect the end of this album to go.
Exactly. Like, when you look at an album's ending, it's always something that wraps up the album well. This just feels like another song in the mix. This just feels like the slower version of like a different song on the album. And it's just like the same song as the others. It's not different. It doesn't wrap anything up. And like you said, it is not a moment of clarity. It does not live up to its name.
Absolutely not. And now we're going to give our final thoughts and our scores for the album in 3, 2, 1. Would you look at that? I finally give a lower score to an album than Zach.
That's interesting.
It is interesting, and I think I want to justify my reasoning for my score first. I think the main reason my score is so low is for how disappointing this project really is at its core. Because goodness gracious, this could have been such a high quality track list at least. This could have been interesting at least, because these are two of the bigger names that are very similar. They can play off each other well. They showed it on some of the best songs on here that they can play off each other well, but they just were not consistent with it. I think that this overstayed its welcome of 54 minutes way too long. They could have cut down about 8 of these tracks and made like even an EP together, and it would have been a lot cleaner, a lot snappier, a lot crisper, a lot better. But of course they made 16 songs and put it on the album, and that's not even mentioning the deluxe album of 24 songs, which I accidentally listened to the first time, which is even more painful than the first time. I think I got to about song number 11 on this track before I just had to turn it off my first couple times. I cannot get through this whole album in one sitting. There's just not enough. And for two people that flex their wealth on you so much during this, they do not put a big budget into production, which is the most disappointing part of this whole thing. Like, how do you flex such a budget on me and give me such mediocre to sometimes atrocious beats on here when you can definitely buy better beats? Like, it's just so painstaking, disappointing of an album. I just cannot say it's great.
Alright, well, now I had to defend my 4 minus. I wanted to grade it between a 3 plus and a 4 minus. And I decided on the 4 minus because I looked back on the album and I thought, you know what, this does have some salvageable parts, which is why I did not think it was a 3. Because getting on into the 1, 2, and 3 range, that's like none of the songs were good. Maybe 1 or 2 were good. But this, I felt like a solid maybe 4 of the songs were really good, which is unfortunately not a whole lot. But now, when I first listened to this, I got to maybe track 7, then to maybe track 13, and then finally finishing it. It took me quite some time to actually finish this album because it was not good. But like, I'm looking back on this album and I make this comparison. Like, here we have 2 negatives, right? We have Lil Uzi and we have Future. It's like 2 negatives make a positive, right? No, 2 negatives do not make a positive here, unfortunately. They have shown us in some of the songs that they can make a positive with 2 negatives, but unfortunately here it just does not happen. It just keeps on going worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, and I think when we were referring to it being a pendulum swinging, I feel like at some point the pendulum kind of fell off and just flew and rolled down a hill until it just crashed, and it was hard to listen to. And I think that you're kind of correct with the 3 is kind of in the range where only a couple songs are salvageable, but I personally think that the enjoyment level is what I graded off, and the enjoyment of this thing by the end of it is just not there. I think if they cut this off at like the 5 songs, the first 5 or 6 songs, I probably would have rated it higher, but the fact that they just kept going, kept mediocrely dropping random music, it feels so long to listen to, but you know a lot of the songs are just short and mediocre. So I think that is just unjustifiable to put it at a positive rating for either of us.
No, it is definitely not a positive here. If anyone were to rate it a positive, they are just, I'm sorry, you're just wrong. But I also don't say it's a 1 or 2, because if you were to rate it that low, then you just did not listen to the full track list, because it does have some bangers, but only some.
There's some highs here. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. It'll really help us out to stay motivated into 2021. We've really been enjoying it so far and really hope to keep producing content for you guys. Check out our socials, link in description. Check out my Spotify playlist I made. It has a bunch of small artists that I really think people should listen to. Just check them out. If you like any of the songs, check those out and check the artists out, because they are working hard for us. I'll put some of the songs I'm listening to right now rolling over the screen as we speak. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and have a good day.